nights and days that shook and split, passed through the fire that burned away impurities and left you white and tempered. You captured glory's heights, glory is yours. There is no glory for a flitting shade who did not share your courage and your fear. Your company is numbered now, ranks closed, entrenched against eternity's attack. You sleep your living sleep in these green isles.
And who wrote that?
That's my dad.
And was he a poet generally? Did he write during the course?
He wrote a few. They were patchy, but some were good and some were good.
It's lovely that you've got those, David, isn't it?
And the other one is, he was a prisoner of war for 2.5 years, and this was written in off-flag camp in Austria in 1942, and this is called Cornflower. This flower, this first blue flower that lifts a lovely head above its prison bed, now cheers me in this hour. I set the seed and tend it, with more than father loving, its slow miraculous growing, and now the care is ended. My firstborn prison child brings me rich recompense, quickening of each sense, hundredfold harvest yield. Here's radiant wizardry, blue of forgotten skies, blue of my far love's eyes, and of the distant sea, ripple of ripening corn, sweetness of new stacked hay, beauty of yesterday, in this flower is reborn.
It's beautifully romantic.
Yeah.
Felt.
Yeah. Nature again we were talking about, breaking through there.
I've got a few, but
You've got a few in that tone there, haven't you?
in here. Yeah, interesting about the poppy exhibition in London, and there's lots of questions, letters. It's quite controversial. Just wanted to say the way the poppies spill from the battlements into the moat will remind many of William Blake's poem London, quote, and the hapless soldier's sigh runs in blood down palace walls. You don't even need to know Blake to see the blood. And so, yeah, so there's lots of thoughts around. So in the end I picked up with Siegfried Sassoon's On Passing the New Men in Gate, which is another type of memorial. On Passing the New Men in Gate. Does anybody know where it is? Right, thanks. Who will remember, passing through this gate, the unheroic dead who fed the guns? Who shall absolve the foulness of their fate, those doomed, conscripted, unvictorious ones? Crudely renewed, the salient holds its own. Paid are its dim defenders by this pomp, paid with a pile of peace complacent stone, the armies who endured that sullen swamp. Here was the world's worst wound, and here with pride their name liveth forever, the gateway claims. Was ever an immolation so belied as these intolerably nameless names? Well might the dead who struggled in the slime rise and deride this sepulchre of crime. So, just to finish with all about memory and remembrance, T.S. Eliot from the four quartets, for last year's words belong to last year's language, and next year's words await another voice. And also, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. when the tongues of flame are enfolded into the crowned knot of fire, and the fire and the rose are one.
Right.
George, have you seconded for us?
Beyond pearly gates, a palace awaits for manual furnace stokers. And we all know well that the road to hell is paved with insurance brokers.
Yeah.
Now, last time up here, Richard and I were discussing different poems, and I mentioned the fact that I experienced, like, and got inspired by people talking to a tree.
Yes.
Now, it's obvious, there was about 9 of them. They were around a big tree at Stockwood Park on the approach path to the 18T. And when I got home a few weeks later, I started thinking about it. And this is what I wrote. It's called The Golf Lesson. My spirits were in the gutter as I rebagged my putter, feeling like a hell-bound soul, and I begged to be excused for the language that I used as another burly putt rolled past the hole. Overwrought with discontent at the practice hours I'd spent, trying to hone my game towards perfection. For I'd suffered all the strife from the kids and from the wife, and now the dog was eyeing me with rejection. As I strolled along the path overstrewn with cockleshell mat, the one that leads us to the 18T, I heard the steady drone of sympathetic tone from a group of people talking to a tree. I turned to my opponent to remark at their atonement, "Don't you meet some funny people on life's way?" He said, "George, you've been talking to your golf ball all the morning, but hasn't done a bloody thing you say." Now, this is called the Stopsley racetrack. We have a crude racetrack in Stopsley, which evolved from Old Wigmore Lane. In this age of speed, patience is in need, and productivity is to blame. And there's a girl drives down our street, a nicer person you could not meet, but she pursues a habit of deceit, with 2 tailor's dummies strapped on the rear seat. When questioned about this unusual behaviour, she said, "I use those boys as my saviours. They deter muggers from bumming a ride, and they never criticise how I drive."
Thank you, George.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, George.
You got one, Frank?
Right, Frank, are you next?
When I was at university, there was a young girl in my
Yeah.
group, a very bright young girl, and she came from Wootton. And I cycled to Wootton about 2003 on Armistice Day in the afternoon on a cycle ride with my sister. And I was absolutely bowled over by the number of wreaths and poppies there were there. And I asked this girl, I said, "There's so many wreaths and poppies there, it seems quite incredible." And I did some research and found out that there are a lot of people from the village that have died, even more than are registered in the Bedfordshire History by Joyce Godfrey. And I went the next year to the ceremony, and they got all sorts of people. The whole village turned out. They got the scouts and the guides and everybody, the youth club and everything else. Ever such a strong turnout. The church was all turned out, the choir and everything else. And so I wrote this poem for her about Wootton. A cold wind winds down Wootton's lanes and twines St Mary's weather vane with smoke that's ripped from chimney pots beside the yew and churchyard box, and blasts between the birch and pine as the tin can bell calls time. In icy bright November light, the scout troop stands in brilliant light, while priest with whitened wind-blown hair records with wreaths and ritual prayer the names of those who fell in line as the tin can bell calls time. They say, we will remember them, all those of Wootton's fallen men, all 7 from the last World War, whose names will live forevermore. But now their young are in decline, as the tin can bell calls time. But how was Wootton torn to shreds, with 44 of great war dead, when parents stumbled on in dread, and wives would sleep in empty beds, while children sobbed in tear-stained grime, as the tin can bell called time. As I say, I think it's a village that probably lost a bigger percentage of people than any other village in there, and that's
It's interesting
still.
that you saw Simon Armitage rumours and poems for the Fallen this last week on television.
No, I
He
didn't see
discovered, I think, only 2 villages in England where all the soldiers actually came back. 2 villages.
He must have
None in
researched that very
Scotland,
well.
none in Ireland.
Yeah, he must have researched that very well.
Yeah.
To do a lot of reading to find out.
Deliberately avoided the war. Reading Mum's autobiography, writing my own, this is about a life story, I suppose. It's Brian Patton. Somewhere between heaven and Woolworths, a song. She keeps kingfishers in their cages and goldfish in their bowls. She is lovely and is afraid of such things as growing cold. There were numerous men that loved her, though they were more cruel than kind, and their love and act in isolation, a form of pantomime. She says she's now forgotten the feelings that she shared at various all-night parties among the couples on the stairs, for among the songs and the dancing she was once open wide, a girl dressed in denim with the boys dressed in lies. She's eating roses on toast with tulip butter, praying for her mirror to stay young, though on its no longer gilded surface this message she has scrawled. Oh, somewhere between heaven and Woolworths, I live, I love, I scold. I keep kingfishers in their cages and goldfish in their bowls.
I love them both.
I never knew either of my grandfathers. They both fought in the First World War and survived, although my father's father, I believe, got out, but his mental health wasn't intact. I don't know, I know even less about my mother's father, except that in our family the war wasn't really something that was talked about in that sort of way. As a child, I got no tales of heroism in the war or anything like that, and thinking about it in later years, I think probably it was because my grandfathers didn't wish to remember what they'd been through and all the rest of it. So relive it exactly, and as a child, and I'm talking of sort of being, junior school age, I suppose, here. The whole, I use the word advisedly, palaver of Remembrance Day was very much a puzzle to me, because nobody really ever explained or put it in context. You were just, expected to do X, Y, and Z, and you did it by rote. Anyway, this is a poem I wrote when, many years later, I can't remember which anniversary it was, I happened to see a short news clip on television with the Chelsea pensioners parading on Remembrance Day. Close to the pond, where goldfish dodged my shadow in the green water, as I trailed hands bloody from gooseberry bushes, grew poppies, their petals more silk than silk. the same flowers whose blaze once broke through the mangled fields of northern France. It was, of course, his garden too, but having missed him by a couple of years, I always thought of it as hers and hers only, though I'd held the medal, fingered the rainbow ribbon he got for turning up at Kitchener's invitation, and each November, without comprehension, had stood silent in tall, high-windowed classrooms with nothing to remember, wearing a sad red imitation in memory of the others. I saw old men who could have been his brothers parading stiffly in red coats today, and thought of him for the first time in years, wondering what of him I had inherited, and if he would have been there if he could, or if, like me, he'd find such show increasingly ironic, sigh and mutter, "Silly buggers, don't they know?"
Yeah.
Awful Devon accent, sorry, but
Very touching poem, right?
thank you.
And a very pragmatic.
Yeah.
Very good.
Because we do end up, it becomes almost treacly in the over sentiment.
The irony of the whole
Push on, I'm not going to
yeah.
get around everybody.
Yeah.
No.
Right, well, I brought for the Second World War this volume of Keith Douglas's poems, and I quite like them, and maybe a few similarities in the sense that his work was published, wasn't it, after he'd been killed. Again, he was killed in a sudden episode, basically, in France. And also this has an introduction by Ted Hughes, which seems to probably review what you were saying there. And I was just looking through for one to read, and I found this poem, Desert Flowers, which he wrote in a general hospital somewhere in Egypt in 1943. So I thought this might be a good one to read. Living in a wide landscape of the flowers, Rosenberg, I only repeat what she was saying. The shell and the hawk every hour, slaying men and jerboas, slaying the mind. But the body can fill the hungry flowers, and the dogs who cry words at night, the most hostile things of all. But that is not new. Each time the night discards draperies on the eyes and leaves the mind awake, I look each side of the door of sleep for the little coin it will take to buy the secret I shall not keep. I see men as trees suffering or confound the detail in the horizon. Lay the coin on my tongue, and I will sing of what the Arabs never set eyes on.
That would be just after Alamein, I bet.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. And he has a prose book about that, doesn't he? Sorry.
I think I just had to write this year, and it was written in response to photographs of soldiers before leaving for the front and how evocative they are. And it's called In Sepia or Darker Tones. In sepia or darker tones, they seem relaxed enough. A little square of grass for chairs brought from the parlour and set before a trellis garlanded with pears, tents of beans, onion beds, a rose-filled arbour, a weeping bough of eglantine droops to a barrel holding on to rain. A bright spade slants the only trench they know. And after this, the hauling up of packs before the red brick path in the winding lane. A last look back outside the wicket gate as thumb and finger close its well-oiled latch. So soon to flick a rifle's deadly catch. They're leaving Cumnor, Tubney, Pewsey in the Vale, for Mons, Ypres and Passchendaele, where clouds that drift across the heaps of mud and lime will not be shedding summer scents of lavender and thyme.
What made did you choose those particular villages, Dick? Is it just the names, or?
There was Oxfordshire. They were all
I was going to say, yeah.
Yes,
they are,
yes.
yeah.
Yes, there's an album of Oxfordshire soldiers.
Ah, right,
Yeah.
yes. I know the names from
Yes.
driving down the A420.
Yes, that's right, yes.
Very
Well,
moving.
Pusey in the Vale, I mean, such an English name. It's different.
It is, yes. Yes, it is.
And
And it's real.
Cumnor was where Matthew Arnold's Skull Gypsy was
Oh,
supposed
was
to
it?
be wandering. So
Students-
it
Ah.
was part of the idyll, the Cumnor Hill.
Governor's claim to fame.
So it's part of the idyll of the English countryside.
Right, yes.
You've got something to read.
Yes.
Oh, you're born.
And that's,
Read us an Edward Thomas.
no, this poem's a collection of poems about Edward Thomas. And this is one by Elizabeth Jennings
Oh, yes.
for Edward Thomas.
That's nice.
I have looked about for you many times, mostly in woods or down quiet roads, often in birds whose question times sound like the echo of your moods when sombre. I have not found you yet, in day sounds or dream-threaded night you watch through, tired-eyed. I set such places by, finding no sight of you in this strange hunt. I turn back to your words. You do not haunt them either. Suddenly I learn your art of being reticent, of leaving birds and trees, hills alone. You left no spirit in any place, or spores of yours where you had gone. Yet though there is no print or trace of you, I see a different way, as if your writing will shine upon cool suns, your words the play of stars with water, your dark, mine.
Can I just mention following bits that one of the letters in the Guardian about the poppies recommended Edmund Blundell, and I hadn't read his poetry.
London.
London, sorry, yeah.
That's right, yeah.
And so I read, and I chose one, but I couldn't read it out because it would have made me too emotional. But it just made what you wrote.
Yes.
So I recommend it, and you probably already know it. So it's Forefathers by Edmund Blundell, and it talks about the young men as they were before.
Yes.
I mean, I'm going to have to just pick out the most popular ones, you know.
I think that gives it a bit of context.
If you're like me, I look at a menu, it's never ever make mine. In my day, I sit in a restaurant hours after the
I do sometimes, me too. I get ribbed about
when
that too.
my niece and her husband, their birthday the other night. So I'm going to suggest there are only 6 of them. And they all chose exactly what they wanted.
Straight away.
Starter, I was
Yeah, I mean, I'm like that.